Why was she always the shadow in the room, the one no one bothered to name? The camp woke to the smell of heat and cordite, a mixture only soldiers could ever mistake for normal. Gravel crunched beneath boots, netting sagged under the sun, and the sound of buckles snapping shut marked the start of another mission. Men moved with purpose, loud in their chatter, louder in their certainty. But Sierra sat apart, 3 meters back, bent over a map she had unfolded across a weatherproof crate. Her fingers traced like someone reading Braille. She brushed valleys, measured distances with a pencil stub, marked the contours others hadn't thought to see. The ink on the map was fresh, her handwriting looping around a single sector circled twice in black, Echo Nest. No one asked what the circle meant. No one leaned over her shoulder to study the lines. A scout passed behind her, muttering about radio checks, not even bothering to use her name. They didn't know it. They didn't care. To them, Sierra was background. The quiet woman with no rank patch, no call sign, no weapon in hand. The team lead ran, laughed loud enough for everyone to hear when someone asked why she was there. If we get hit on at least we've got a decoy. The men chuckled. Not cruel, just casual dismissal, the kind that cuts deeper than cruelty because it's so thoughtless. Sierra didn't flinch. She folded the map with deliberate calm, creases aligning like muscle memory. She capped her pen, slid the map into her satchel, and pulled a faded net of strands across her shoulder. Her motions were practiced, silent. She knew no one was watching. The team moved out, their noise filling the jungle edge, static bursts from radios, laughter muffled by the canopy, the scrape of bolts drawn and reset just to feel the weight of readiness. Sierra stayed behind a moment longer. She reached for her water bottle, lifted it carefully, and let a single sip cool her throat. Metallic taste, heat trapped in plastic. Then she stood, quietly. No one marked the moment she crossed the gravel line and stepped into the ferns. No one noticed her slip under a cable line, knees bent, feet finding silence as though she belonged more to the jungle than the camp. She disappeared in less than a breath. And the men she had just left behind, they never even thought to ask where she was going. Because that was Sierra's gift. The jungle closed around her with humid weight. Vines hung thick as curtains. Sunlight broke in fractured shafts, cutting the canopy into shifting mosaics of shadow and gold. Each step sank into moss and leaf litter. Sweat slid down her collar, pooled beneath her long sleeves. She ignored it. She was already slowing her breath, counting the cadence in her head, 4 in, 6 out, hold, release. Silence wasn't absence, it was presence. She pressed flat to the earth, elbows tucked, knees dragging forward inch by inch. Mud clung to her cheek, cooled her skin, hardened into a mask. The net blurred her outline into the foliage. She became less woman, more terrain, not to vanish, but to belong. And yet beneath her focus another voice tugged, the memory of the final marksmanship trial years ago, the one she had failed, not for missing, not for panic, but for refusing to answer when ordered. The instructor had barked for confirmation mid-crawl and she had stayed silent, purposeful, certain. They called it insubordination. The board called her incomplete. She remembered their faces, the way they wrote her off with the same dismissiveness she had felt at camp this morning. Forgotten, ignored, not worth the ink on a roster line. But silence had never been weakness. Her body froze. A broken stem caught her eye, bent at the wrong angle, not crushed from above, snapped from below, recent, careful. She shifted slightly, weight balanced on her rib cage, eyes searching the ground. A patch of moss flattened between twin roots, too clean, someone had passed here. She moved again, slow as breath. Stillness, then motion, stillness again. Then she heard it, a hawk cry from somewhere above the slope, sharp, too sharp, repeated. The rhythm wasn't natural, it was code. Her pulse slowed instead of racing. She adjusted her breathing. A counter-sniper team, already here. Her eyes caught the faint glint of glass through the foliage, 10 meters up. A tripod, scope hooded, concealment good but not perfect. She could smell sweat drifting on the breeze, not hers, someone else's, close. Sierra didn't panic, she didn't rush for her weapon. She let the forest breathe around her. A beetle crawled across her glove. She didn't twitch. Through patience, shapes began to form. 3 of them, perfectly spaced. One crouched behind a brush rise, long rifle balanced on bipod. Another mid-slope, scanning in pendulum sweeps from his tripod nest. The third sat higher, binoculars on his knees, headset mic angled toward his mouth. Overwatch. They were confident, too confident. Their sweeps overlapped but not tightly enough. Independent rhythms not synchronized as one. She saw the gaps, the moments where silence opened like a doorway. The first sniper exhaled, calm, unaware. Sierra's finger touched the bolt, rotated it gently. The metal clicked into readiness. Her cheek pressed to the mud. Her reticle found his. And then the jungle cracked open. A soundless shot, air folding in on itself. The man slumped forward as if sleep had claimed him mid-scan. His hand slid from the grip, his head lowering gently. No burst, no cry, just absence. The others didn't understand. Not yet. Echo 1 status, a voice on the radio. Silence. The overwatch shifted, binoculars raised, eyes narrowing at the slope. His head ducked, unsure. His hand hovered near his mic. The second sniper scanned too fast, his optic passing too close to where Sierra lay, pausing, squinting, moving on. He never saw her. Her second shot arrived like breath, no louder than a thought. The overwatch folded backward, balance failing. His body slid behind the rocky ledge. Gone. Contact left. Repeat contact. The radio broke with static, half sentences cut off mid-transmit. Only one remained. The last sniper froze, hand on his scope, rifle still pointed downrange where nothing mattered anymore. He whispered into his mic, but the silence answered. His shoulders tightened. Alone. Sierra's scope traced him. No rush. No tension, just inevitability. Her exhale slowed, trigger contact bent. The round slipped free of the chamber, swallowed whole by the forest. The man folded forward into brush. No scream, no call, just collapse. 3 down. And no one had seen her. The jungle exhaled, cicadas resuming their rhythm, birdsong filtering back into the air as if nothing had broken it. Sierra held still another 30 seconds, listening. No pursuit, no follow-up calls. Nothing but her breath, her heartbeat, and the sound of the earth reclaiming silence. She pulled the bolt back, lifted the spent casing, placed it gently beside her pack. One by one, she retrieved the first 2 casings. The third she left where it had fallen. A message. Not for them, for herself. Nest is clear. Her whisper was barely sound. It carried into a secure channel no one had assigned her. No response returned. None expected. Because they hadn't seen her leave. Her crawl out was slower than her crawl in. She erased her presence step by step, minute by minute, breath by breath. The forest folded behind her. The slope returned to stillness. By the time her boots touched gravel again, she was no longer the ghost who had slipped between ferns. She was just Sierra. Back at camp, voices rose. Radios clicked. Screens blinked. 3 red markers appeared on the drone feed over the grid Sierra had circled hours before. Rand leaned over the monitor, coffee untouched beside him. Whose team was in that sector? No one, an analyst answered. No air assets. None. The image sharpened, showing 3 bodies spaced in a triangle, slumped, motionless. Where's the breach point? Rand demanded. No one moves through that ridge without showing up on sensors. But the terrain showed nothing. No thermal tracks, no displacement, no heat bloom. It doesn't happen, Rand muttered. Unless, someone whispered, it wasn't people. The kill logs updated. Operator 61. Who the hell is Operator 61? Rand asked. A young scout, one who had mistaken Sierra for a comms assistant earlier, spoke quietly, eyes fixed on the feed. I think that's her. Rand turned slowly toward the wash basin outside the tent. Sierra stood alone, rolling her sleeves above her elbows, dipping her hands into cold water. Mud streaked her face. She wiped it away without hurry, without show. She unzipped her rifle case and slid the weapon inside, sealing it shut. No flourish. No explanation. Rand took a step closer, words dying in his throat. "You went alone," he whispered. She didn't answer. The camp had begun to understand. Because sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It doesn't wait for applause. Sometimes strength is silent, and it moves before anyone even realizes it was there. Why did silence frighten them more than gunfire? The camp moved differently after that morning. Conversations dimmed when she walked past. Men who had laughed over jokes about her being a decoy now lowered their eyes. A young private, the same one who had whispered behind Rand's shoulder, fumbled his rifle strap when Sierra brushed by. He didn't mean to. His hands just shook. She hadn't spoken a word since she came back. She hadn't explained the circle on her map, hadn't admitted she had crawled out alone, hadn't described the 3 bodies now logged in the system under Operator 61. She didn't need to. The camp already knew without knowing. Whispers travel faster than radio signals. She sat at the rear slope that evening, away from the noise. Her rifle case rested beside her, unopened. A battered supply crate served as a seat. Boots braced against the incline, she stared at the tree line. The same tree line she had disappeared into. The same tree line she had returned from. She didn't look back at the camp. But they looked at her. A pair of scouts lingered near the tent flap, their eyes flicking toward her like moths toward a lantern. They whispered as if she couldn't hear. She could. She heard everything. How'd she know? One asked. The other hesitated, then gave the only answer that felt true. Because she was already there. Sierra exhaled slowly, feeling the words settle into her chest. Already there. Not an insult this time. Not a dismissal. Something closer to reverence, though neither man would ever admit it out loud. She shifted slightly, reaching into her pocket. Her hand closed around the sniper coin she had lifted from the first man she dropped. The blackened metal was rough at the edges, heat, worn thin from years of use. The crest was scratched but unmistakable. She rolled it between her fingers, studying the grooves. This belonged to someone trained, someone who had once believed in mastery. Someone who had walked the same line she walked now. But he hadn't been ready for her. And that thought made her jaw tighten, not because she felt triumph, but because she felt the hollowness of inevitability. His coin was in her hand, but his silence was heavier. The camp crackled with life behind her, radios spitting static, field stoves hissing, boots striking gravel. But she stayed apart, body angled toward the slope, the jungle, the unknown. Inside the command tent, Rand and his analysts still watched the loop. They had replayed the drone feed a dozen times, trying to find the breach point, trying to see what wasn't there. Rand rubbed the back of his neck, eyes hollow. He wanted answers. Instead, he was left with absence. Absence shaped like Sierra. Later that night, he approached her at the wash basin again. His steps were deliberate, but his words stumbled. "You didn't have to go alone." She didn't turn. Cold water ran down her forearm as she scrubbed away dirt. The basin water turned brown, rippling with each careful motion. "You should have told me," he tried again. Silence. Her towel dabbed at her face, wiping mud into faint streaks, almost like camouflage she no longer needed. Rand's throat tightened. He wanted to demand an explanation, but something about her stillness made the words stick. He had led teams, commanded operators, barked orders into radios without hesitation. But with Sierra, his authority felt fragile, like it might shatter against the weight of her quiet. So he left. And Sierra stood alone once more. Sleep never came easy in jungle heat. Tents swayed, fabric snapping softly with each shift of the wind. Men shifted in their cots, muttering half-dreams. Sierra lay on her mat, eyes open, studying the shadows stitched across the ceiling. Her journal sat open beside her, a pencil resting diagonally across the page, lines sketched ridges, notes scribbled in shorthand no one else could read. Her hand hovered above the pencil, then dropped back to her side. Words felt unnecessary. What could they capture that silence could not? But one thought lingered. Tomorrow would come, and with it, another mission briefing. Would they finally see her, or would they continue pretending she didn't exist? The answer didn't matter. What mattered was that Sierra knew what the tree line hid, and she knew it wasn't finished. Because silence never ended in 3 shots. She closed her eyes, the coin still resting in her palm, its edge pressing into her skin like a reminder. Morning came harsh and unkind. The sun rose with a sharp blaze, heat soaking through canvas and armor plates alike. Men pulled straps tight, checked optics, swallowed rations without tasting. The camp buzzed with tension, a hive unsettled by a predator no one could see. Rand's voice carried across the clearing during briefing, firm but cracked at the edges. He outlined patrol routes, radio codes, fallback positions. His words filled the air, but his eyes kept flicking toward Sierra, standing at the edge of the group, silent as ever. No one joked this time. No one called her a decoy. But silence replaced mockery, and silence could cut deeper. When briefing ended, men dispersed with a new kind of glancing fear. Not fear of Sierra herself, fear of what she represented. If someone could walk unseen, strike without sound, and return without trace, then what else waited out there? She moved before them, stepping toward the jungle's edge again. Not part of the unit, not separate either. Something in between. This time, though, Rand called after her. "Sierra." She stopped, not turned, just stopped. His voice lowered, quieter than the breeze stirring dust at his boots. "If you're going again, don't leave us blind." For a long moment she didn't respond. Then her head tilted slightly, almost imperceptible. Not yes, not no. Just acknowledgement. Then she vanished into the green. Her boots touched moss, her breath slowed, her body dissolved into silence. And once again, no one saw her go. But they all felt the absence she left behind. What did the jungle know that men never learned? The canopy swallowed her whole within minutes. Branches locked above like a vault, sealing away the sky, pressing heat down into the earth. Her boots sank into loam so soft it muffled each step. Vines brushed against her shoulders. Insects pulsed in waves, a rhythm older than war, older than memory. Most men cursed the jungle, called it hostile, called it enemy. But Sierra never did. She had learned early the jungle was neither friend nor foe. It was truth, and truth had no need for permission. Her breath slowed, steadied, disappeared. The camp behind her would return to its noise, its doubts, its endless questions about who she was. She didn't need their recognition. She needed stillness. She moved belly to ground again, hands forward, knees dragging carefully through layers of fern. Mud cooled her cheek, blending her into the slope. Her net spread over her back, leaves stitched into the strands like she was no longer a soldier, no longer a woman, just another patch of earth. But silence wasn't emptiness. It was full, heavy, alive. She listened for the absence within the noise. Birdsong, insects, leaves shifting, all natural, all balanced, until nothing. The air ahead thickened, a pause between calls, the stillness of intent. She froze, pressing her body deeper into the mud, ribs straining under the weight of breath she refused to release. Her eyes searched without moving. A snapped twig angled wrong, a line of moss flattened, too recent, too careful. Someone else was here. Her hand slid slowly toward the rifle slung at her side. The bolt was already smooth in her grip, the chamber clean, the scope adjusted. She didn't raise it yet, not until she understood. A sound came, not human, not voice, metal, a click faint, deliberate from the ridge above. Her pulse didn't race, it slowed, measured. Another counter team. But something different this time. The hawk call never came. No signal, no fake bird cry, just silence thick enough to press into her ears. Whoever was above her wasn't communicating. Which meant they weren't searching, they were waiting. Her chest tightened, not from fear but from memory. Years ago, lying in another patch of mud, another canopy above, she had waited too long. She had listened too intently, convinced her stillness could outlast theirs. It hadn't. A round had cracked inches above her skull. Bark had splintered into her cheek. She had survived only by accident, a shift of wind carrying her scent away. That day had burned something into her. The certainty that silence could be survival, or it could be a trap. Her cheek pressed harder to the dirt now. She inched forward, 10 centimeters, froze, listened. A faint vibration rolled through the soil, not steps, heavier, distant. A vehicle. But there were no tracks, no roads here. Her eyes narrowed. The jungle was not supposed to carry machines. Not here, not in this sector. And yet the ground thrummed again, faint but undeniable. She adjusted the scope, not aiming at any shape, just scanning the slope ahead. Leaves shimmered in heat distortion. She adjusted again, dialing focus slowly. There. Not one machine, 3. Hidden under netting so dark it almost blended with the canopy, engines off, cooling. Not patrol vehicles, not transport. Staged, waiting. Her breath caught at the edge of silence. These weren't scouts, not snipers, a forward operating element, a staging post tucked into the... She rolled her jaw, clicking it faintly. Her ribs ached against the ground. The camp hadn't known. The analysts hadn't seen it. The drone feeds would never catch it under canopy that thick. But she had. Her lips parted slightly, almost forming words she would never say out loud. They're building something here. Her fingers tightened on the rifle, not in fear, in calculation. She could take the shot. One engine block, one soldier moving through the brush nearby, one signal flare before they realized. But no. Not yet. Stillness again. Because sometimes silence wasn't only a shield. Sometimes it was a blade. She would wait. Above the slope, movement flickered. Not snipers this time. Operators in pairs, scanning, rifles slung. Their formation wasn't tight. They weren't expecting threat. They thought themselves invisible. Sierra's chest rose once, fell. They hadn't seen her. They hadn't felt her. Not yet. But the question pressed hard against the inside of her skull. Why here, why now? The camp had no idea this existed. No patrol routes reached this slope. No mission brief had covered it. Which meant someone had lied. Not to the analysts, not to Ran. To all of them. Her jaw tightened again, a click echoing in her skull. Someone back at command already knew. And they had chosen not to tell. Her breath stilled. Her finger hovered near the trigger. Her cheek pressed against the scope pad. But she didn't fire. Because this wasn't her fight yet. Not until she understood why silence had hidden more than just her. She eased back, inch by inch, her body folding into the terrain, retreating without sound. Each movement erased the last. Each breath left nothing behind. The jungle shifted slowly back into balance. Birdsong returned. Insects pulsed. But Sierra carried the absence with her. By the time she reached the gravel edge of camp again, hours had passed. The sun had tilted lower, staining the canopy gold. She stepped across the line unnoticed, her boots quiet, her body settling into camp shadows as though she had never left. No one looked up. But one analyst, pale from hours in front of the drone screen, raised his head as she passed. His eyes flicked from her mud-streaked sleeve to the rifle case she hadn't opened. He started to speak, but no words came. He only nodded once, almost like acknowledgement, almost like apology. Sierra didn't slow. She moved back to the basin, rinsed her gloves, let water run down her arms. Slow, deliberate. Rand stepped from the command tent, jaw tight, eyes burning with questions he didn't voice. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because he knew. She had been beyond the line again. And whatever she had seen, she wasn't ready to tell. Not yet. The jungle had whispered something new. And silence, once again, was the only language Sierra trusted. What do you say when the truth itself feels dangerous? The camp was restless that night. Lanterns swung beneath the tarp, their light catching in the eyes of men who pretended not to look at her. Radios whispered static into the humid dark, as if carrying secrets no one wanted to repeat. Somewhere, laughter rose too loud, too forced, then died as quickly as it started. Sierra sat apart, boots planted in gravel, journal balanced on her knees. She hadn't written a word in hours. The pencil lay across the page, its tip smudging faint lines from the morning. The map sketches, the shorthand notes, all of it seemed too small now. The jungle had shown her something larger, something that couldn't be confined to paper. She closed the journal softly and let her hand rest on the cover. Rand stood across the clearing, watching. His posture was casual, rifle slung across his back, hand loose at his belt. But his eyes gave him away. They followed her like searchlights. He crossed the distance with deliberate calm. Gravel shifted beneath his boots. When he stopped in front of her, he didn't speak right away. Just looked at her, at the mud drying on her sleeve, at the faint marks pressed into her cheek from hours against a rifle stock. Finally he asked, "What did you see?" Her eyes lifted slowly, unreadable. She didn't answer. "You went back in," he pressed, voice low. "Don't deny it." Still silence. Rand's jaw tightened. "You can't just disappear beyond the ridge whenever you want. I need to know what's out there." She studied him for a long moment. His words carried command, but beneath them she heard something else. Fear. Not of her, but of what he didn't know. Her gaze dropped back to the journal. She placed the pencil across the cover and closed it fully. Then she stood, brushing dust from her pants, and walked toward the basin. Rand's hand twitched, like he might reach for her arm, but he let it fall. "You're not part of my team," he called after her, voice tight. "But whatever you're doing, it's going to get someone killed." She paused at the basin, dipping her hands into cold water. The ripples spread, carrying mud and leaf pulp away. She didn't look at him, didn't argue, didn't defend herself. Silence. Rand cursed under his breath and turned back toward the tent. Inside, the analysts were still glued to the screens. One monitor replayed thermal overlays, the other ran live drone sweeps. Both showed nothing unusual, just green, just heat, just jungle. No vehicles, no operators, no staging site. Rand scanned the feeds, frustration twisting his face. "Expand grid Sierra 12 again." The analyst obeyed, the terrain sharpened, still nothing. Rand leaned closer, whispering like the absence itself was mocking him. She saw something. "Sorry." He straightened, jaw set. "She always sees something." Back outside, Sierra dried her hands on a towel clipped to her belt. The water dripped into dirt, darkening the ground at her feet. She lifted her head toward the tree line, the same slope she had crawled through hours before. Her chest ached with the weight of unspoken truth. If she told them, if she revealed the hidden engines, the operators, the staging site, they would demand proof. Proof the jungle had swallowed. Proof no drone could capture. And when they failed to find it, they would dismiss her again. Or worse, they would ask how she had known, why she had gone where no one sent her. And that question was more dangerous than silence. Because it wasn't just what she had seen, it was what she had realized. Someone had known. Someone higher up had marked that grid and left it off the maps. Someone had cleared the blind spot, had fed the analysts empty data, had hidden the truth beneath layers of false terrain sweeps. Someone wanted silence. But Sierra's silence was not theirs. The camp settled into restless half-sleep. Tents sagged under the weight of humidity, soldiers tossing on their mats. The night air pressed close, thick with insects and the smell of fuel. Sierra remained awake, sitting against her crate, eyes fixed on the dark line of trees. Her fingers turned the sniper coin over and over in her palm. The edges cut faint marks into her skin. She welcomed the sting. A memory surfaced, her final trial years ago, the instructor's voice barking in her ear, demanding confirmation. She had refused to answer, not out of defiance, out of principle. She knew silence mattered more than obedience. But they had written her off anyway, marked her incomplete, filed her away as nothing. Now those same men sat in tents, drinking coffee, staring at screens that showed nothing, because silence had beaten them again. The jungle shifted. A faint breeze carried the smell of smoke, not campfire, not ration burners, different, heavier fuel. Sierra's head tilted slightly. Someone was moving in the dark. She rose without a sound, sliding her rifle case strap over her shoulder. Each step away from the camp was measured, deliberate. She didn't announce herself. She didn't ask permission. She walked past the gravel line, into the grass, into the green. No one stopped her. But Rand, standing again at the tent flap, saw her silhouette vanish into the trees. His hand clenched into a fist at his side. He didn't call out this time. He only whispered, almost to himself, "God help whoever's out there." The jungle welcomed her again, its canopy closing like a gate. She crouched low, boots sinking into soil, net unfolding across her shoulders. Her breath slowed. Her pulse steadied. The smell of fuel thickened. She moved toward it. And the question pressed harder against her chest. What was she walking into this time? What happens when silence begins to feel heavier than noise? The jungle at night was different, less forgiving. The canopy caught the moonlight and fractured it into thin silver slats across the ground. Shadows doubled, then tripled. Every vine looked like movement, every branch like a hand. The air was thicker, soaked with heat that never lifted even in darkness. But Sierra moved as though she belonged to it. Her boots found the softest ground, her body folding low, the strands dragging behind her like roots. Breath slow, heartbeat slower, eyes scanning without panic. The smell of fuel was stronger now, sweet, sharp, heavy in her throat. She tasted it at the back of her tongue, not just fuel cans, engines, many of them. She paused, pressing flat to the dirt, cheek brushing against moss slick with dew, listening. Not insects, not birds, a hum, low, distant, steady. She crawled forward inch by inch, ribs grinding against soil, mud cooling her skin. Her hands parted fern leaves so carefully that none of them bent or snapped. Each pause stretched into long stillness, the jungle's noise washing back over her before she moved again. And then she saw it. Through the lattice of vines and branches, nets hung heavy over steel shapes. Not 3 vehicles, not even 6. More, at least a dozen, armored carriers. Their edges softened by camouflage netting but unmistakable in the way their hulks caught light. Men moved between them in silence. No flashlights, no chatter, just shapes. Shadows carrying crates, adjusting gear, securing straps. Their formation was disciplined but not military in the open way her unit operated. Too quiet, too practiced in concealment. This wasn't a patrol. It wasn't even an advance post. It was a staging ground. Her jaw tightened until her teeth ached. The analysts back at camp would never see this. The drones would miss it, blinded by canopy density, fooled by heat displacement. The men who laughed at her silence would march out tomorrow believing the ridge was clean. And they would die for it. Her finger twitched near the bolt of her rifle, not to fire, not yet, just to feel the certainty of steel. She studied the men moving in the dark. Their insignia was faint, painted over, half scratched away, intentional. She caught fragments as they turned, no clear nation, no clear allegiance. Ghosts, operators built to leave no trail. And the realization struck her like cold water. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't just the jungle hiding enemies. Someone had allowed this. Someone had carved the blind spot wide enough for an entire staging ground to grow inside it. Her chest rose slowly, fell slower. Silence pressed into her ears until her own pulse felt like betrayal. She could return to camp now. Wake ran, force him to look into her eyes and believe her without proof. But she knew what would happen. They would ask for evidence. Thermal overlays, drone shots, hard data. She had none. Only what her silence had given her, the truth no machine could catch. And once again, they would dismiss her. Or worse, they would put her name on a report, attach it to knowledge she wasn't supposed to have, and then the silence she carried would become a target on her back. So she lay still, mud cooling her cheek, strands blending into vines, rifle unmoving, scope tilted downward unused. She didn't close her eyes, but she let her thoughts slip inward. Years ago in her trial when she had refused to answer, she had felt this same weight. That silence was not emptiness. It was choice. It was power. But now, in the humid dark, surrounded by engines and men preparing for something larger, silence felt like punishment. She could almost hear the instructor's voice again, barking over her crawl. "Answer me, candidate. Acknowledge the order." She hadn't. And maybe that refusal was what had carried her here, lying in mud, the only one who knew what the jungle concealed. Her hand closed around the sniper coin still in her pocket, its edges dug into her palm. She imagined the man she had taken it from. Did he believe silence was strength too, or had he died for believing noise could save him? A sound cut her thoughts. Metal scraped, a crate opened. One of the operators knelt beside it, pulling out something long, cylindrical, wrapped in cloth. He lifted it with care, set it down, unwrapped the layers. Sierra's breath froze. It wasn't supplies, it wasn't ammunition. It was a launcher, heavy, compact, built for range. And beside it more. 5, 6, 7. The staging ground wasn't preparing for patrol. It was preparing for strike. She shut her eyes for half a second, the weight of realization pressing into her chest. Tomorrow, her unit would walk blind into this. Not just snipers, not just a counter team. An ambush armed with weapons designed to erase them before they even saw threat. And no one knew. Except her. She opened her eyes again, steady, calm, deliberate. Her hand left the coin, returned to the rifle, not to fire. Not to betray her position, just to anchor herself. Stillness. Breath in. Breath out. Her ribs ached, her jaw clicked faintly. She stayed with the pain. Then she began to withdraw. Slow, inch by inch, erasing her presence as carefully as she had entered. The jungle folded over her, hiding her again. The hum of machines faded behind leaves. The smell of fuel thinned. By the time she reached the gravel line near camp, the night was darker. Lanterns glowed faint beneath tarp edges. Men shifted in sleep, rifles close, boots stacked. They had no idea. Sierra paused at the edge, still in shadow, eyes fixed on the camp. Her silence pressed harder now. She could wake them. She could warn them. She could shatter the stillness that defined her. But her throat held nothing. Because some truths, once spoken, could not be taken back. And she wasn't sure if this camp was ready to hear them. She stepped inside, boots sinking softly into gravel. She moved past the basin, past the tents, past the glow of lantern light. Her journal waited where she had left it. She opened it with steady hands, pencil scratching across the page. Not words, not explanations. Just a map. She circled the ridge again, twice, pressed the pencil so hard the paper nearly tore. Then she closed the book, slid it under her pack, and lay back on the mat. Her eyes didn't close. She listened to the camp breathing, to men dreaming of safety they didn't have. And she whispered, so faintly it was almost only breath. "They'll never see it coming. How do you warn men who never learned how to listen?" The sun came hard and fast, burning the ridge before most of the camp had shaken sleep from their eyes. Canvas steamed in the morning light. Boots thudded against gravel as men rolled mats, tightened straps, passed canteens back and forth. Rand's voice cut through it all, steady but lined with fatigue. He ran through assignments, sectors, fallback routes. He spoke as if the ridge was clean, as if last night had been just another night. Sierra stood 3 meters back, not with them, not apart. The same space she always occupied. Her journal was closed, her rifle case slung across one shoulder, her sleeves already damp with sweat. No one looked at her. Or maybe they looked too much. A private tied his bootlace twice, hands fumbling when her shadow crossed the gravel near him. A scout muttered something under his breath, voice too low to carry, but his eyes flicked nervously to the tree line beyond. They didn't joke about her anymore. But they didn't ask her either. And silence held its edge like a blade. Rand finished briefing, voice carrying final orders. "We move in 10, stay sharp, eyes open." The men scattered, checking optics, shouldering rifles, slapping magazines into place. The rhythm of readiness filled the camp. Sierra didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the jungle, on the slope she had crawled through hours ago, on the netted vehicles, the crates, the weapons waiting in silence. She could feel it even now, the hum beneath the ground, the weight of engines cooled overnight, the press of intent from men who believed themselves hidden. She should speak. She should tell them. The words pressed against her throat like trapped breath. Ambush, ridge, launchers, simple, clear, enough to change their path, to buy them time, to save them. But her lips stayed still, because she knew what would follow. Questions, demands, proof. Where did you see it? How do you know? Why were you there? Why didn't the drones catch it? Why didn't command warn us? Her silence wasn't just choice anymore. It was shield. If she spoke, she wouldn't just expose the ambush. She would expose herself. And someone, somewhere, wanted silence more than truth. Rand's voice called out again, "Form up." The squad gathered, boots aligned, rifles angled. Dust rose in spirals beneath the morning heat. Sierra watched, her chest tightening. They were walking blind. And she carried the sight they refused to ask for. Her hand brushed the sniper coin in her pocket, its edges cut into her skin, grounding her. She thought of the man who had dropped in silence, coin tumbling from his pouch into her palm. Did he know? Did he realize before the end that his silence had been stolen from him? Her jaw clicked faintly. The squad moved out, boots crunching into gravel, then softening into soil. Radios crackled with casual check-ins. Voices filled the space the jungle had left. Sierra followed, not within formation, not trailing behind, parallel. Her steps bent into shadow, her body folding toward the green. She slipped between trees as if the canopy itself opened for her. Her net dragged across ferns, strands catching light, vanishing again. The squad never noticed. And maybe that was the point. The slope climbed steady, sweat pressing through armor, rifles heavy in hands. The men cursed the heat, cursed the climb, cursed the silence between them. But Sierra's silence was not between. It was above, around, inside. Her cheek pressed once more into the dirt as she slid belly down into the ridge. Ahead, through broken lattice of vines, the staging ground woke. Nets pulled back. Engines coughed. Operators moved in shadows, voices low, hand signals sharp. It was beginning. Her scope lifted, eye adjusting, breath slowing. Through the glass she saw crates dragged open, launchers lifted, tripods extended. Men checked optics, loaded tubes, nodded without speaking. They were setting the line. Her squad didn't know. They were moving straight into it. Her chest clenched. She could end this. A single round into the operator at the far tripod, a second into the loader. Confusion would ripple, delay would buy time. She could break silence now. Her finger touched the trigger, bent slightly. Then stopped. because breaking silence here wouldn't save them, not all of them. Too many guns, too many angles, too much prepared. If she revealed herself too soon, the squad would walk blind into chaos. Stillness. Her breath slowed. The squad climbed closer, their voices faint but audible through the trees. Rand's orders clipped, scouts answering back, boots shifting stone. Sierra's pulse steadied. She waited, because silence wasn't just shield or blade. Silence was timing. The jungle thickened, cicadas pulsing in waves. Leaves stirred in spirals as heat rose. And then, the first engine roared to life. A carrier lurched forward under netting, tires biting into soil, metal grinding. Operators moved faster now, stripping covers, snapping bolts into place. The ambush was no longer waiting, it was moving. Her squad had less than minutes. Sierra's eyes closed for a breath. And when they opened, the choice was already made. She slid the bolt back, chambered the round, cheek pressed hard into the stock. Her silence had kept them alive this long. But silence would not keep them alive today. The trigger bent. The jungle cracked open. A single round whispered into motion, vanishing into leaves. The first operator dropped, launcher half raised. His body folded into dirt, weapon clattering against roots. The second froze, eyes wide, hand gripping his strap. Confusion spread like a ripple. Voices rose sharp, frantic, cutting through the morning heat. Sierra shifted, scope swinging, reticle aligning. Second shot. Another body fell, rolling sideways beneath camouflage netting. Engines roared louder. Shouts erupted. The ambush broke its own silence, chaos spilling across the ridge. And below, Rand's squad heard it. They froze mid-climb, rifles swinging up, eyes wide. The jungle was no longer quiet. It was alive. And Sierra had made sure they couldn't ignore it. What do you call someone you never see, but who saves your life before you even understand the danger? The ridge exploded. Engines roared as netting ripped back. Shouts cracked the air, rifles snapping into place, boots pounding against soil. The jungle no longer hummed with insects. It screamed with men who thought they had owned silence. But Sierra broke them first. Her second round still echoed in her chest as she shifted her scope, cheek pressed into stock, breath even, pulse calm. A loader stumbled back against his crate, blood blooming through his shirt. His launcher clattered into the dirt, useless. Another operator swung toward the sound, eyes scanning the green. He never found her. Her reticle aligned, the trigger bent. He folded forward, silent as the others. And still below on the trail, Rand's squad stood frozen. They had heard the crack, suppressed, swallowed by the jungle but close enough to pierce every man's chest. Their rifles swung upward, eyes wide, searching tree line, ridge, canopy. Contact front, a scout shouted, voice sharp with panic. But where? They saw nothing. Only chaos above them. Engines grinding, shouts rising, shapes moving in shadows. Then another shot, another body dropped. Rand's voice cut sharp, commanding, take cover now. The squad dove, boots slipping on soil, bodies pressing into roots and rocks. Rifles snapped into shoulders, scopes angled uphill, fingers trembling on triggers. But they couldn't see what Sierra saw. Her silence was the only thing keeping them alive. She adjusted her scope again, mapping the angles. One carrier rolled forward, its barrel angling down slope. Too slow, too clumsy for jungle terrain. Her reticle found the driver's side slit. She exhaled, fired. The glass shattered. The vehicle lurched, stalled, hissed smoke. Shouts erupted from inside. Men cursed, doors slamming open. They spilled out blind, weapons half ready. Sierra's bolt slid back, chambered another round. Her breath was steady, mechanical, every shot measured, every angle calculated. This was not dominance, this was control. But inside her chest, something shifted. She had broken silence. She had revealed herself. They still hadn't seen her, but they knew. And knowledge carried weight. Below, the squad returned fire now, rounds snapping against canopy, sparks flying as bark splintered. Their panic turned to rhythm, Rand's voice corralling them, pulling order from chaos. Cover left. Shift fire. Move on my mark. But none of them could deny it. Their line held only because something unseen was cutting the ridge apart. A private pressed against a root, breath ragged, rifle trembling. "What the hell is happening?" he whispered. Rand didn't answer. He just kept his eyes fixed uphill, narrowing, calculating. Because he was beginning to understand. Another shot cracked. Another operator fell. It wasn't luck, it wasn't chaos. It was her. Sierra shifted position, crawling through mud, weaving her body between roots, net dragging soil. She never stayed in one angle, never lingered long enough for pattern. Each shot came from a new fold of shadow. Each silence returned heavier than the last. The ambush crumbled. Operators broke formation, shouting into radios, their signals fractured by panic. Men dove for cover, scrambled behind stalled vehicles, fired wildly into green that gave them nothing back. Sierra counted breaths, counted bodies, counted angles. She wasn't faster, she wasn't stronger, she was inevitable. Her squad below began to move under Rand's command, crawling to better cover, rifles spitting back into the ridge. They still hadn't seen her, but they felt her. One scout pressed his helmet against dirt, whispered hoarsely, "Somebody's up there." Another answered, voice shaking, "Yeah, somebody's keeping us alive." Sierra didn't hear them. She didn't need to. Her cheek pressed harder into stock. Her scope cut through smoke. Another reticle aligned, another breath left, another silence cracked. And in the split second before the man dropped, Sierra's chest clenched with something she rarely let herself feel. Relief. Because for the first time, her silence wasn't hers alone. It belonged to them too. Still, danger pressed closer. The operators weren't all broken. Some regrouped, voices rising, hands signaling. Two rifles swung downslope, angled toward Rand's position. They didn't see her. But she saw them. Her reticle found the first, trigger bent, shot vanished. He collapsed sideways, rifle never fired. The second pivoted, mouth open, shouting into his mic. Sierra's finger pressed. Silence cracked. He folded into his own shadow. Rand's squad shifted position, eyes scanning wildly. They still couldn't see her, but they began to believe. Not in luck. Not in chance. In something, someone watching. Rand ducked behind a root, chest heaving, rifle clutched. His eyes narrowed uphill. For a breath he thought he saw it, a flicker of net, a shimmer of leaves, a ghost inside the green. And then it was gone. But his jaw set tight. He knew. She was here. And she was saving them. Sierra slid her bolt back again, chambering one more round. Her gloves were caked in mud. Her cheek burned from stock pressure. Sweat traced her spine, soaked into her shirt. None of it mattered. She breathed in, breathed out. The ridge belonged to her. The silence was hers again. But for the first time, it wasn't only about her survival. It was about theirs. When silence saves you, do you ever hear the world the same way again? The ridge had gone quiet. Engines smoldered, heat shimmering off twisted metal. Bodies lay still where they had fallen, rifles half buried in dirt, radios cracked and useless. Smoke curled through the canopy, staining morning light into gray streaks. And below, Rand's squad lay pressed into cover, their rifles still clutched tight, their eyes still wide. They waited for more. Another shout, another shot, another enemy. But nothing came. Only silence. Not absence, presence. Rand rose first, cautious, rifle aimed uphill. He scanned smoke, brush, shadows. He saw nothing. only the aftermath of a fight none of them had been prepared for. The others followed slowly, climbing to their knees, scanning sectors, weapons trembling from adrenaline. They looked at each other, confusion heavy in their faces. How are we alive?" one whispered. Another shook his head. We didn't do this." Rand's eyes narrowed. He knew. He couldn't prove it, couldn't point to a single movement, a single shadow, but he knew. She was here. He exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle. The squad gathered in a loose line, scanning the ridge as they advanced. They passed bodies they hadn't fired upon, weapons they hadn't disabled, vehicles they hadn't stopped. None of it belonged to them. It belonged to her. And though no one said it out loud, every man felt it settle into his chest. They hadn't survived by skill or luck. They had survived because someone, unseen, had chosen to break silence for them. Sierra lay prone still, cheek pressed into mud, scope steady though no targets remained. Her breath slowed, heartbeat measured, body unmoving. She watched her squad advance, eyes scanning, rifles lifting at shadows that no longer mattered. She listened to their voices, fractured, hesitant, heavy with disbelief. And for the first time in years, she let herself close her eyes for a single breath. Not relief, not triumph. Something else. Belonging. Even if they never spoke her name. She slid her bolt back, chamber empty, casing ejected into damp soil. Her gloves were raw, her sleeves soaked, her cheek burning from pressure. None of it mattered. She rolled slowly, body folding back into roots and fern. Inch by inch, silence reclaimed her. She the same way she had entered, unseen. By the time Rand's squad reached the crest, Sierra was already gone. They found wreckage, weapons, silence. But not her. Back at camp hours later, the analysts replayed the feed again and again. Drones had caught the ridge only after smoke began to rise. Too late to see her crawl, too late to trace her path. The monitors showed no breach point, no thermal track, no muzzle bloom. Just 3 minutes of absence. And then silence marked by still bodies. Rand stood over the monitors, jaw tight, eyes hollow. "Operator 61, the analyst whispered. The name blinked at the bottom corner of the screen. Rand didn't answer. His gaze shifted toward the far edge of the camp, where Sierra stood again at the wash basin. Her sleeves rolled high, her face streaked with mud. She dipped her hands into water, slow, methodical, quiet. She didn't look at the screen. She didn't look at them. But they looked at her. The same soldiers who had laughed at her days ago now watched in silence. They didn't speak. They didn't ask. They only understood. Because they had walked into death, and walked back out only because she had been there first. Sierra patted her hands dry with a towel, lifted her rifle case, sealed it without ceremony. She didn't seek acknowledgement. She didn't need it. She stepped past them, eyes fixed on the tree line beyond camp. The wind stirred leaves into spirals, dust rising from the gravel beneath her boots. And in that moment, every man in camp knew the truth. Not being seen. Only felt. Later, when reports were filed and higher officers demanded answers, the analysts would speak of sensor glitches, environmental anomalies, unexplained disruptions. Words that meant nothing. The truth would vanish into paperwork, buried beneath language designed to erase it. But the men who had been there would not forget. They would remember the silence that became shield. The silence that became blade. The silence that saved them before they even knew they were in danger. And they would remember her. Sierra. The woman who was never given a name until her actions earned one. The soldier who had been dismissed, ignored, overlooked. The operator who had carried silence like a burden and turned it into the only reason they still drew breath. That night, long after the camp had gone still, Sierra sat alone at the edge of the ridge. Her rifle case lay beside her, unopened. The net was folded under her arm, damp with dew. She held the sniper coin in her palm, its edges worn, its crest faint beneath scratches. She turned it slowly between her fingers, then closed her hand around it. Not for proof, not for possession. For memory. Because silence wasn't emptiness. It was presence. And presence had saved them. Her eyes lifted toward the tree line, the same place she always returned to. The jungle whispered, insects pulsed, leaves stirred. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because silence had already spoken louder than words ever could. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.